Alright guys, welcome back to another MCreator tutorial. So today what we're going to do is learn how to run a function like this. This is a block that can be found under world procedures, actions, and then right near the top here we have run function, and then its namespace, and then function. Where it says function, we need our registry for our function. We'll get into that in a little bit. It is a block that only runs on server side, so keep that in mind. Now, when we're working with this block, we have basically to create a function, or if there's an existing function, we can use that. To create a function, we go under the mod elements, create, and then function, and then we're going to call this force night. So basically, force night would allow us to type in a function here. Force night is the registry name up here, and then we have two different types of parts here. We can have it under our own mod namespace or the Minecraft namespace. Generally, you want it under your own, and then you would delete this line here. Now, if you leave this line in, it's just going to be like a comment. You can leave notes like this as long as it starts with the pound sign. So you can basically leave any note in here and just have commands under here to run next. So it helps kind of let you remember what the function is for, what parts are for what, and everything like that. So we're going to delete this in this case, and we're just going to go and say, and then we're going to type out a message. So this can be the night is now here. And we might want to add a game rule or time. Maybe we can set the time set, and then we can do something like 1800 or 18,000 for setting it to midnight. So that would be our command there. And basically what's going to happen here is this one is going to run our command for the say command. And then there shouldn't be any space after this, because it can actually cause problems if you have a space. Like if I have a space after this 1800, that's not a proper command, so it will basically fail. We need to make sure that it's typed properly when we're actually typing the command. So after this line is basically run, in the next thing that it's going to do is it's going to run the time command. This happens all in the same tick. So when you're working with functions, it's basically going to do everything, and you're going to separate commands based on what line it's on. So we have two commands, we have two lines, and yeah, that's basically all you need to do. So if we go ahead and copy this, we'll save that, and then we'll go to our tutorial, and we'll basically go ahead and paste this in. So force, now we need our namespace. So we can go to our workspace, grab our latest, that's the workspace registry or namespace that we're working in, and then separate it with a colon so it's between. All right, so that's all we need to do. When we right click on this particular block, we're going to go ahead and run this function. So let's go ahead and try that out. All right, so as you can see, the current time of day is that, and if we go ahead and place this down and then right click on it, you can see that it immediately updates to midnight. So basically it gives us a message there, and then it says okay, and then it tells us that the the thing is here. So it's basically turns it to midnight. So there is another thing that you can do with functions, and this is kind of like a little hack, but it doesn't actually work with the function block, at least not right now. So I'm currently on 2026.1, so it might be added in the future, but you can use something called macros, which is actually a really funky thing to work with. So I'm going to open up Notepad and kind of explain a little bit. So in your function file, what you would do is you do something like this, and then when you're actually running a command, this can be done through, I think, the command block. So you would basically do something very similar to that. Now, how macros burst basically works is it allows you to specify that it's going to be a macros by a $sign at the very beginning. This should be your first character. And then your command and then basically any values for that command. Now, when we get to this part here, we have another $sign, and that basically says, okay, this is going to be like a value or a variable that we're going to use later on in our command. So from here, we have a round bracket on both sides of our key. So a key is basically just like a variable that we're going to assign that will basically say, okay, this is what we're going to use. Now, this could be anything that you really want. Just specify something like for this example, I just said key _1. But it could be basically any text as long as it's one single part. So it needs to be connected all into one character. So, or, word. Now, you wouldn't be able to do something like key 1. It needs to be like key _1 in that case. You could have something like banana, and that would work as long as your key up here is banana as well. So banana. And that would work just fine. So what does this actually do? It basically says, okay, we're going to use this as a variable, basically, give or take. It's basically just saying, okay, this is a value. We're going to use this later on in our command. And then when we're typing the command out, what we do is something like function, and then latest, or our namespace, and then our registry for that particular thing. And then what we have is our curly brackets directly after. This basically says, okay, this is what our variables are going to be in. And then we list our variable keys. So key 1, colon. And these are 3 different types of variable types. So you might encounter them depending on the types of things that you need to do. For example, game rule is a Boolean, which is a true or false. So you need to actually specify true or false. There's a catch to that, though. If it's just simply true or false like that, it's going to return a number. False will be 0 and true will be 1. So you need to actually encase this in a string value, which will print out the value exactly as false or true. That's pretty much the only exception. Strings are basically anything that you can think of. It's just with quotes. So basically a string is like a word or a string of words. So we can basically specify things with strings with that. Now, when you're separating your keys, make sure to put a comma after it. You don't need to at the very end, just between your keys. And the last one, key 3, is time set and then our value, which is 1800 here. And this is basically just a simple number that we can insert here, which will set it as a number instead of a string or something like that. So hopefully this makes sense. Let's go ahead and give this one a try, and we'll run it as a command instead. All right, so we need to create a new function. We're going to call this something like test macros, and then we're going to create a function. We're going to just paste that in from what we had here. And we're going to use this as our registry. So we're going to save that. And we're going to go back to Notepad, update our registry. So we have our registry name here. We also need to make sure that we have the correct command. So function, and these are our values that we're going to use. So we can basically save all that. And then we're going to go to our command. So we can't use macros on 2026.1. I don't think it will work on prior versions either. So we need to actually run it as a command. So for that, we can go to our actions, and then there's one called execute command. And as long as we use the function, it should work just fine. So again, this runs only on server side. So we're running it on server side to make sure that it's optimized. And this should happen when we right click the block. So let's go ahead and save this and pop in game and give it a test. All right, so we're currently in day now, and if we right click on it, we can see that it updates, and we can also see that the day is not progressing in time. The moon would be moving if that was the case. So how does that actually work with the command? So basically, if we go function, and then we would have our function name, and then we would have our key values. So basically key 1, and then colon, and then this was our string. Then we would do something like a comma, quotations after, and then we would have something like let's see here, time is day. And then we would have our comma, and then our key value, so key 2, quote, and then we would have true to make it progress if we wanted to do that, comma, and then key 3, and then we would have our time. So we're just going to use 0 for that one. So if we look at our time now, we can see that it's actually progressing, and it's actually at the beginning of the day now. And we also got the message, this world must suffer, the time is day. So it's not a perfect example of the grammar, but it is what it is. So we could test it, make it force at night, and then we can basically run it as day, and it's using the exact same function. All right, there is one last thing that I want to actually show, and this is actually pretty cool because it's built into the game itself, and it has been for some time now. If we go to our tags and click on tags, there is some built-in options for common tags. If we go to functions, there's 2 here. So one is called load. Now, whenever you load up the world, basically you can assign functions to run when the world is loaded. The other one here is tick. So this one's a little bit more optimized from what I've heard on Wiki, which will allow you to run a function every tick. So it's just a tag, and you would basically go ahead and add that function to the tag list, and it'll basically run constantly for the tick one. And if you're running with a loaded, then you would do the same thing. So basically you just add your function to this list. So, and this one will run first when the game starts, and this one will constantly run. You don't necessarily need both of them. You can use one or the other or both, but just thought I would mention it as it's actually a really handy tag to actually use when working with functions. Other than that, if you're new to my channel, don't forget to subscribe, comment down below, rate the video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching. Peace out.